Okay, so thank you for joining me on today's webinar using the Standard Operating Procedure Builder in FCS Express 7. Today's webinar is going to focus on how you can use the SOP Builder to allow you to create predetermined steps or instructions in your FCS Express layout. Okay, so when you build an FCS Express layout, the layouts tend to be pretty application specific. And what we could do as part of that application is we could build steps as a way to help you standardize that application. So if you were sharing this with some collaborators or with other people within your lab, you could use the SOP as a way to do that. What you can also do is you can use the SOP as a way to create a training document for the people within your lab. So for example, maybe you're a lab where you have a lot of turnover and um, to get the employees up to speed, maybe you want to create an SOP where you hand them the FCS Express layout that has the SOP built into it and the data to go with that, and then they can actually go through the SOP steps to learn different bits of information about what they're looking for within a certain application and analysis. Okay? Or if you're a lab that has a lot of medical students or a lot of residents rotating in, what you could do is you can create a training tool so that way an FCS Express layout focuses on a particular condition. Maybe you have a layout that focuses on a particular leukemia or lymphoma that seems to be pretty prevalent in your lab. What you could do is you can create this SOP layout that tells the user look for this as part of the instructions within the layout to help train them so that way they can figure out what they need to look for. Also, as part of today's webinar, what we'll do is we'll talk about how we can format gates, markers, quads, objects, or even pages with different permissions and authorizations that are available for those objects. Okay, so specifically, each of the objects that we create in FCS Express can be conditionally formatted so that way we can either allow editing or disallow any ability to format a particular object. We can also customize the visibility of that object. So an object in FCS Express can be either made always visible or we can make that conditional where maybe we only want certain plots to appear if it turns out you have X amount of events within that plot. Okay. For our clinical customers, they have the ability to determine page visibility. So for example, if you have a page where that page is, there's a bunch of plots that are focused on a particular population of interest, where maybe on a certain day, maybe you don't have any cells that fall within that gate. So maybe you don't necessarily want to show the plots that are associated with that page. So then what you could do is you can hide that page if it turns out that the number of events within a particular gate falls below a particular criteria that you want to set. And also as part of today's webinar, what we'll do is we'll talk about our permission rules that are available within FCS Express. So the permissions rules allow you to set available permissions specific to the layout. And what that means is that there's a list of operations that you can either allow or disallow within a given FCS Express layout. For example, maybe you want to disallow the ability to allow the user to move a gate or move a marker or delete an object based off a particular condition. You can use permission rules as a way to enable or disable those actions within a layout. And we'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later, where I have a specific example set up to show you. Okay, so I've gone through the process of creating this template where we have 2 density plots and then 3 histograms, each histogram looking at a different parameter. Okay, in this case, we're using a pretty common sample. So this is a particular bead set that I'm sure many of you have used for different QC or instrument performance purposes, where we're looking at that bead cluster and then we're applying this gate to various histograms to look at the 6 peaks that are available within that bead set across different parameters that we're analyzing. Okay, so as part of this exercise, what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how we can add and format 4 different SOP steps as for different things that we may want to look for in this example application. We'll also talk about how we can modify gate quad marker permissions within this layout. And then once we're done setting up the 4 SOP steps that we're going to create, what we can do is we can insert an SOP table that helps us summarize what's going on within those SOP steps and the date that that particular SOP has been completed. And then we'll also run the SOP to see how it goes and see what that looks like. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go up here to the ribbon. You'll notice that within the ribbon, there's a quality tab. And within that quality tab is our SOP section. From the SOP section, we're going to open our standard operating procedures window. And this window is just like a dockable window that we offer, any other dockable window that we offer in FCS Express. Okay. So we can move this around and we could dock it to either side, or we could just leave it floating on top of our layout. But the idea is that we can add a step to our SOP. And in this case, I've already added one for you. So we give this step a name. And then as part of that step, we can provide a short description and some instructions that are going to be used to perform this step. Okay, so in this case, we're just telling the user to click on the plus sign within the data list toolbar and then to navigate to the file of interest and select it. Also, as part of this step, we have the ability to determine whether or not we want to apply a condition to the step that would determine whether or not the user can go on to the next step. Okay, and this is pretty cool because what we could do is we can come in and we can put some type of a condition that's being evaluated within our layout to see whether or not it's time to go on to the next step. So with this loading data step, the most sense it would make is to evaluate whether or not there's any data within our plots. And we can certainly create a statement where we evaluate that. So the way we can do that is simply just by taking a plot. I simply just drag it into this section. I can tell FCS Express to take a stat from that plot. And in this case, I just want to look at the number of events within that plot. And in this case, I simply just want FCS Express to evaluate whether or not the number of events within that plot is going to be greater than 0. So with our SOP, whatever condition we apply here, if that condition is true, the user will be able to go on to the next step. Okay? So as part of this example, what we're going to do is we're going to add 3 more steps that are going to just be different ways of how we can evaluate these different parameters that we're measuring here. Okay? So we're going to add one for our FTSE parameter. And in this case, what we're going to do as part of this step is we're going to evaluate to see whether or not we have a required number of events in each one of these peaks. Okay, so in this case, I just want to make sure that I have 1,000 events that make up each one of these peaks. So next to this FTSE plot, you'll see that I have a statistics table that shows me the parameter, the marker name, a stat for the number of events in each marker, and also the median value for each marker. Okay. So I've added the SOP step, I put a short description, and my instruction step is going to be to check that there are 1,000 events in each marker in FTSE. Now, as far as how I would develop the condition, I can simply just take a stat and just drag it in here and see whether or not that is greater than my number. Okay. What I can also do is I can create a custom token that does that for me already. And I've already taken the liberty to create a custom token where I'm taking that event count for each one of these markers. So M1, M2, M3, M4, M5, M6. And I'm looking at a combination to make sure that each one of those, using the AND operator, is greater than 1,000. So once I do that, I can take that custom token and just drag it into this window. So as I mentioned, FCS Express will allow a user to go on to the next step of the SOP if that condition is true. In FCS Express speak, what we do is we take a true or false value and we evaluate it as a number. Okay, so a number in FCS Express for true is -1. Okay, if I actually right-click to show the value for this token, you'll see that it is true. So each one of these peaks clearly has more than 1,000 events in them. And you can see that number here represented. Okay, so what we want to do is we just want to make sure that the only way that the user is going to go on to the next step, if it turns out that this particular formula is equal to -1, to make sure that this token is true. If I display that value, you'll see that as I move these peaks around, you'll see that it will flip and flop between true or false, depending on what the numbers are. So our next SOP step is going to be for our PE parameter. We're going to call it check PE. And what we're going to do is we put a small description to inspect the PE plot. And in this case, what we're going to do is we're just simply going to visually inspect that there are 6 peaks in the PE plot. Okay, and the way we're going to do this is through the use of another custom token. Okay, so I've created one, I've added one to the list here, but I don't really have any formula here. So my intention was to use this PE check as a way for the user to come in, manually verify that yes, I do see 6 peaks there, and to check a box to verify that. So with FCS Express, what we can do is we can have a custom token represented in a number of different ways. And one of those ways is as a checkbox. Okay, so once we display that as a checkbox, if we check that box, the value of that custom token will be represented as true. If we deselect it, it goes to false. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this, this custom token, and we're going to allow this so that way the user will only be able to go on to the next step if that condition is true. So if this checkbox has been checked, so that the user is manually verified that they can see 6 all peaks within that plot. So my last SOP step is going to be to check our PerCP Sci 5.5 parameter. And in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to check the R squared of our regression. Okay, so in this case, you'll see that next to the PerCP Sci 5.5 plot, what I've done is I've added a spreadsheet. And to this spreadsheet, I've added some of the information that you see here within this table. So I've added the marker name, I've added the median value for each one of these peaks. What I've also done is I'm taking that median value and I'm doing a conversion of that number. So if I just double click on that plot in this cell, you'll see what that conversion, what the formula is that's being performed. And I've simply just copy and pasted that to these other cells to use the values in the appropriate row data. Then I've inserted a scatter with regression plot where FCS Express performs regression modeling directly within that plot. And once I insert this, then I can just see that any of the different parameters that are available in the spreadsheet, I can select for my X and Y parameters within this regression plot. So in FCS Express, when we're performing regression, we have the ability to extract the stats from the regression, to use that in evaluation within the analysis. Okay, so in this case, we instruct the user that our R squared for PerCP Sci 5.5 is greater than 95%. Okay, so I can again go to my condition section, and I can grab a statistic from that regression plot, or I can just take this plot, drag it in here, and grab a stat from it. And when I do that, rather than take a traditional two-dimensional stat from that plot, I can choose the ability to grab one of my regression parameter statistics for my R squared. And in this case, I just want to make sure that this number is greater than 0.95. Okay, so we have 4 steps of our SOP. That's perfect. So now I just want to talk about how we can format the different permissions that can be applied for different gates, quadrants, or markers within our layout. Okay, so as part of this layout on this page, you'll see that I've inserted a gate view. And within that gate view, there's my beads gate. If I double click on this, specifically on my gate, you'll see that within this edit window will be the ability to edit this gate, or the ability to allow a gate edit for my beads gate. So I can make it always true, where I can always edit this gate, or I can completely disallow it. I also have the ability to customize this. And then down below is where I can put the condition for where I can customize this. So as part of our SOP feature, we have a whole batch of different SOP tokens that can be used for these purposes. Specifically, there's one for the current SOP step, the step number, where maybe I only want to allow the edit of my beads gate when I'm on step 1. Okay, and then once I do that, you'll see that if I try to edit this, I'm not going to be able to do that. But once we start our SOP, then I'll be able to edit that gate without issue. I can also come in and format my quadrants. So if I right click on a plot to format it, and I go to my quadrants section, you'll see within that quadrants section, there is the ability to format the visibility and whether or not we can move those quadrant markers. Okay, so I can either always see my quads or not see my quads, or I can customize the visibility. The same thing with whether or not I want to allow the ability to move them. Okay, and it's the same idea as before. So for example, if I simply just customize the ability to visualize these quadrants, I can come in and figure out the criteria that I wanted to use. So for example, maybe I just wanted to base it off of the number of the percent of cells I have in my beads gate. Or maybe I only want to see it if it turns out that it's greater than 90%. See? And as you can see here, because that number obviously does not meet that criteria, you see that the quadrants have disappeared. And if I change this, you'll see how they reappear because now that is true. And I could do the same type of mechanism for whether or not I want to allow someone to move that quadrant. The same ability is there for my markers. So if I simply just format my markers, my histograms, and if I go to the markers category, you'll see the same sections for visibility and allow move, where we can customize whether or not we want to see these markers and whether or not we want to allow the ability to move these markers. And again, it's the same mechanism where if you want to customize that, then you could figure out what the condition is that you want to use to allow that. Okay. And then finally, what we can do is we can also customize the ability to view a text box. So if I just insert a text box, if I right click within that text box, I can format it, where I can customize the visibility. So what this means is that I can use these text boxes as a way to annotate my data. Okay. And then as I put little messages or little notes in my layout, I can determine what the visibility of that text box is going to be based off of a condition. Okay. So maybe I want to base that condition off of the number of cells within a quadrant. So I could put a message in here where maybe I want to customize this if it turns out that the number of cells in this lower left quadrant is greater than 15%. I can select the plot, what the quadrant is, and finally the stat that I'm using for this evaluation. And then you see that as that appears, that text box will appear or disappear based off of that condition. Okay? So being able to hide a text box is a great way to annotate your layout and have the note that comes with that text box to appear at different steps of an SOP. The same type of mechanism could also be applied to different objects. So if I, again, just format a particular object, I can format whether or not those objects are visible based off of a condition. So again, if I'm looking for a particular target and maybe I don't have any cells for that target, maybe I would like FCS Express to hide those plots. Well, then what I can do is I can customize the visibility of a plot to meet that criteria. Okay, so if I had less than 90% beads within this gate, I could have this plot disappear. Okay, and then again, just like before, we can come in and format this so that way I could just choose a stat that's going to enable that criteria. Again, where if the condition is true, then we'll see that object. And for our clinical customers, what they can do is they can format a page for the same type of property. So if you have a page of plots where all the plots are, again, looking at a particular target, a particular population of interest, and you don't really have enough cells to warrant looking at those plots, then what we could do is we could hide that page altogether too. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in, I'm going to insert a text box. And now that we have all these SOP steps, what we can do is we can insert something called an SOP table. So if I click on that, you'll see that FCS Express gives me a table that it automatically creates for me. And within this table, it will show me the step numbers, what the description of the step is, and when that particular SOP step was completed. Okay, and this will all auto-populate as we go through the SOP. Okay, so as a way to run through this SOP, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take my data out of here. So we'll just get rid of this. And we'll just start the SOP. So the way we start the SOP is from the Quality tab, and you'll see that there's a Run SOP button. Okay. So when I do that, I'll get this Run SOP window. Okay. So the Run SOP window will show me the description that I've entered into that step, as well as any instructions that I've loaded into that step. In this case, the software is prompting me to load data. Okay. So I'm going to click on the plus sign on my data list. I'm going to find some data. And once that's done, then you'll see that I will be able to go on to the next step, or if it turns out that that condition wasn't met, I won't be able to go on to the next step. So then I'll just click on the triangle here in my Run SOP window, so I can go on to the next step. Okay. And again, this is verifying that next step where we're just making sure that we have 1,000 events in here. If it turns out that this condition is not met, you'll see now that I am not allowed to advance to the next step. Also, you'll notice that in our SOP table, it's automatically putting the date for when we completed this step. And also, as you remember, I was only able to edit this beads gate based off of the first step. If I try to edit now, I'm not going to be able to edit. Okay, because I've created where I was only able to edit that gate based off of the fact that I can only do it on step 1. Okay, I do have the ability to go back, where now if I need to move this, I can. Maybe I want to make this bigger. If I make this bigger than 90%, maybe I could actually make that plot down here appear. And there it is. Okay. So again, I can continue. I have 1,000 events in my markers. I can continue again. So I'm visually inspecting that I have 6 peaks in my PE plot. Looks good to me. I see 6 peaks. I'm going to check that checkbox. And I'm able to continue. Okay. So my R squared is greater than 95%. And then again, I could just continue, and my SOP is done. Okay, so again, you can see how the SOP allows you to build all these steps directly into your layout with these detailed instructions and also these conditions that determine whether or not you can go on to the next step based off of whatever condition you want to apply to this application. Okay. So at this point, I want to start talking about permission rules. So again, from the Quality tab, there's a window for permission rules. So here's a layout that I have that's specific for a particular type of analysis that's going on. There's quite a bit of analysis going on. As you can imagine, this needs to be heavily monitored. So what I've done is I've created a permission where I can only edit this layout if it turns out it's been unsigned. Okay, so what I can do is I can come in and the idea is that I can add a permission. I can determine what the description for this rule is. So what I've done is I've created a rule where this rule will lock the template once it's signed. Okay, and in order for me to do anything else to this layout, I have to unsign. Okay, so the way this works is we add the permission, we provide a description, and the rules that are going to be defined by this description. Okay, and then down below you'll see is where all the different actions that we can secure through this rule. Okay, there are quite a bit of rules here. As you can see, so each one, there's a number of different steps, and each one you can expand. You can see various permissions that can be enabled or disabled as part of the rule that you want to create. Okay, so in this case, what I've done is I'm actually using our security and logging feature, different features that are available in FCS Express to help satisfy 21 CFR Part 11 compliance in our software. And as part of that, we offer the ability for electronic signatures to be applied to your data. Okay. If you have more questions about our 21 CFR compliance, you could always contact us at support@denovosoftware.com for more information about that, and we'd be happy to help you out. But in this case, what I've done is I've assigned a status where if it turns out that my status is true, then what will happen is it will lock this layout and will either enable or disable whatever permissions I've selected here. Okay, and then as part of this permission, what we can do is we can determine that the actions that we select, whether the ones that are not included are allowed or not allowed as part of this rule. Okay, so just to show this, if I just simply go to my first page, you'll see that I have the ability to come in and edit my gate. Okay, I can make any modification. If I want to move my quadrant, I can do that. And the reason I can do that is because my document's unsigned. But what I can do is, let's say I want to sign this now. I'll just select the signature that I want to use with this. And now it's signed. If I go in and try to make any moves, you'll see that this layout is completely locked down. I can't move a gate. I can't move a marker. I can't delete anything. Okay? And the only way I can go back and gain that access is to come back and unsign my layout. And the whole point of that is because as I sign and unsign, as part of our 21 CFR compliance, we do have audit trail capability. So those actions are being captured within that audit trail every time someone's unsigning or signing. Okay? So again, if I come back in, if I unsign this, You'll see that the status has changed. If I try to make some modifications, I can do that now. Okay, so the permission rules give you the ability to add permission to different actions that can be performed within the layout based off of a condition that you want to enable as part of that layout. So that pretty much wraps up all the different topics that we wanted to talk about as part of the standard operating procedure in FCS Express. So I just want to wrap it up just by going back to our original template and kind of just going over the points that we talked about earlier. So in conclusion, FCS Express can provide you with the tools to help you maximize your efficiency by giving you the ability to build these step-by-step instructions directly into your analysis. And as part of these step-by-step instructions, we can provide conditionality. So that way you can determine whether or not a user will be able to proceed to the next step based off of a condition as it applies to the analysis that you're trying to build. So the SOP builder is a great tool to help you standardize an application. Or again, if you're trying to create some type of training tool for your staff or different colleagues, the SOP feature has a lot of tools that helps you be able to accomplish that. In FCS Express, there are new tools, tokens, and functions that are available that can be incorporated as part of this. If you From the new tokens that we offer, we also offer a number of custom token functions that are available that I didn't necessarily talk about, but if we go back to our custom tokens window, from the functions category, you'll see that there's a category just for SOP functions. And again, these are either true or false questions where we're looking to see whether or not SOP has been run. Again, if it has been run, then it'll reflect as true. If not, it's false. And basically all these other conditions too, whether it's on a particular step, if it's before or after a step, whether it's finished or whether or not it's running. And then finally, the authorizations and permissions rule that can be created provide an added layer of security to the analysis. So whether you actually want to do it to different gates, to different objects, a quad, a marker, or if you're looking more for the ability to restrict different actions that can be performed within a certain layout. Hopefully you can see how the authorizations and permission rules that are available within FCS Express can help you enable that, and how you can actually build that into an SOP as part of that procedure. Okay? So again, thank you for joining me in today's webinar. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact us at support@denovosoftware.com. Or if you haven't already, please go to our website, denovosoftware.com, and download a free 30-day trial so you can start using it today with your own data. Okay? I'm going to stay on the line for a couple minutes to take questions. Thank you again for joining us. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact us at support@denovosoftware.com. We'll be happy to help you. Thank you for joining us and have a great day.